welcome everybody to this webinar on open educational resources, hosted by Xamk and also the University of Skövde. Today we'll be diving deep into open educational practices throughout the INGENIUM Alliance, and it's my pleasure to welcome, first of all, Director of the INGENIUM European University, Anna Álvarez, who will be here to give us a wonderful keynote to get started. Anna, over to you.
Thank you, Kai. I'm really delighted to address you all here today at this webinar on sharing open educational practices. It's great to see a large number of people attending, and I'm sure many more people will be watching the video when it's made available. And I'm really inspired with this opportunity to join you in exploring how openness, collaboration, innovation can shape the future of education across our shared INGENIUM European campus. And at the core of INGENIUM's mission lies the commitment to breaking down barriers, geographical barriers, institutional barriers, intellectual barriers, to create a vibrant and interconnected academic community. And open educational practices are a cornerstone of this vision. So by embracing open resources, we empower educators across the Alliance to share their expertise. We enable students to access high-quality materials, and we will foster a culture of co-creation that really transcends all borders. So this webinar here today offers a unique opportunity to dive into the why, into the how, into the what of open education. So our dear speakers today, our colleagues from MTU, Skövde and Xamk, will guide us through critical aspects of this journey, from understanding the importance of publishing educational materials for maximum visibility, to navigating the clarity and flexibility provided by Creative Commons licenses. Finally, we will listen to how these principles can be brought together, offering actionable strategies and real-world examples of open educational practices in action. The INGENIUM Alliance we all belong to is built on the belief that collaboration drives progress. Our shared European campus is a testament to this, uniting diverse institutions in a common pursuit of excellence and openness. This webinar here today, following the footsteps of our previous discussions on micro-credentials and open education, is yet another step towards that vision. And as we gather today, let us reflect on the transformative potential of openness. Let us commit to fostering environments where educators and learners alike can share, can adapt, can innovate without boundaries. So thank you all for being part of this journey. I'm really excited to hear the insights of our speakers will be sharing here today, and to continue building together the future of open education with all of you in the INGENIUM Alliance. So looking forward to the day ahead. Thanks.
Thank you, Anna. It's wonderful to have you here with us today. And I can't wait to see what open educational resources we start creating in INGENIUM, and see what we can do together. Next up, it's my pleasure to welcome Jeremiah from the Department of Technology Enhanced Learning in Munster Technological University, who will be giving a talk today on why is it useful to publish educational material in places where it can be found. Jeremiah, over to you.
That's great. Thanks, Kai. And thank you, Anna, for opening our webinar today. So just before I begin, I just want to signpost you to this little QR code here. As Anna mentioned there in the beginning, the idea of collaboration is really important to us all. So this is a little bit of crowdsourcing. So this is just a quick form that's going to ask you about if you have a local, a national, or an international repository that you use. If you don't know what these things are, that's fine. You'll know by the end of this talk. But if you do, please add any information you can to this form, and we'll share it afterwards. I'm going to move from this slide, but the QR code will be available over here for the rest of the slides as well. Okay. So with that said, imagine spending weeks or months creating a really excellent learning resource, maybe to only use it once, and after which it stays locked away in your VLE or your learning management system, where only your students and maybe even just one cohort of students can access that. But what if that same resource could help thousands of learners worldwide kind of engage other educators and then amplify your professional impact? So what we see here is an all too common problem where as educators, we spend unnecessary time preparing resources when another colleague at another institution may have already done so. And obviously this is particularly pertinent when we're working in a university alliance with 10 universities across Europe. When we produce resources in this way, we just produce them for our class, they have very limited or worse, no discoverability. That means that people can't find them, people can't use them, and they just live on a hard drive on our computer, or they live on a virtual learning environment in our university. And worse still, then it's a poor use of our university's funds. So the simple solution then towards this, which has really wide-ranging benefits, is to share them. To make them accessible to others, to make them available to others to adapt and to reuse, using the appropriate license, which other colleagues will probably talk about a little bit later, such as a Creative Commons license, which you can see here in the bottom right. That means that you can use these slides afterwards, adapt them, remix them, and use them for whatever you like. And that's a better use of these kind of public funds that we're availing of. So just briefly, for anyone who's not familiar, open educational resources, they're free educational materials like textbooks, videos, courses, curriculum, and so on. They're typically released under a license like the Creative Commons, and they allow people to use, share, adapt, redistribute them for learning and teaching purposes. And as I mentioned there in the bottom right, you can see an example of a Creative Commons license. So what we're talking about today then really falls under this umbrella of openness. So there's a wide range of open educational practices, which other colleagues will be talking about in a while. There are things like open data, making the data sets that we have available to others, open science practices, open source and computing, open access publishing, making our research available, kind of bypassing the commercial publishers. And specifically what we're talking about here is open educational resources, so the kind of learning and teaching materials. So these open educational resources, they're accessible through repositories typically. An open educational repository is a digital platform that stores and provides free access to educational materials, those that we've discussed, textbooks and so on. These repositories are characterized by open licensing, as we've mentioned, allowing people to reuse, modify, and redistribute them freely, typically just with attribution. And importantly, they serve as searchable databases where not just educators like ourselves, but students and other learners, outside of universities, the universities are benefiting from public funds that are provided by all of society. So putting your educational resources on a repository means that any learner can access these and reuse them and share the ideas. And of course, the ultimate aim of all of this is to democratize education by removing barriers of access. So again, talking about commercial publishers, paywalls, and things like that, this is bypassing all of that, avoiding people who are capitalizing on kind of the taxpayers' money, basically. So why should you create and openly share your work? So there's a number of benefits, of course, to this. You increase the visibility of your own work. You increase the reach of your work and the impact of it. You can share these and promote these resources at your institution, at the national level and internationally. So for example, across our INGENIUM Alliance. And you can do that through kind of platforms like this webinar. If you have opportunities to speak to colleagues across INGENIUM at events, share the resources that you're teaching, and this promotes your work. And so by doing this, you're contributing to a growing global community of educators and researchers who are committed to making education more accessible. So this is kind of the ethos of openness. And it's important to remember that openness it's not just a technical or kind of a legal choice, with the licensing. It's a pedagogical and an ethical one. So there's a whole ethics around this, a very positive ethics, I would say. And again, it's using public funds in the best way possible. So as I mentioned, there are three different, as I kind of hinted at, There are three different places that we'll typically find open educational repositories. So the repositories are places that house these materials. Often we'll have an institutional or a local one. An institutional one might be policy driven at our institution, or a local one might be initiative by a research unit or a researcher or someone else. Often nation states will have a national open educational repository. This is driven by national policy by the Ministry of Education or similar. And then, of course, there are international repositories as well. And, in the Venn diagram, INGENIUM overlaps all of this, of course, because, we're 10 different institutions. We've got our local resources, but then, of course, we have our national ones, and then we have our kind of international collaboration, as Anna suggested at the beginning, events like this where we can talk about resources that we use. So most institutions maintain a repository of some sort. Sometimes this is a legal requirement because they need to share resources like publications. And typically these are focused on open access publishing. So just by way of a few examples here, this is one I found from the University of Crete. This is their institutional one. So this is at the local level. These kind of repositories will be found in most universities, and they're typically for sharing research articles, peer-reviewed articles, preprints of those. But as you can see here on the bottom right, some of these do include the uploading of learning and teaching objects, which can be really useful. So some people might include reports or slide decks and things like that that can be used by others in the institution and from outside, because these are open access. But just kind of in preparing for this, I just kind of had a quick dig around and I came across this one. I don't really know this resource, but it's just an interesting example because it's created by an individual. So this individual has created this repository, and it's a French open educational resource around modern languages and so on. So you have this kind of local idea of research units creating their own repositories and making their research outputs available that way. Another local example, so our department, the Department of Technology Enhanced Learning at MTU, have our own kind of collection where we have a project that we run called the Reusable Learning Resources Initiative. And as part of that, there are a number of different outputs and that we promote them through this. And promotion is something that I'll get to really quickly in a second, but I did want to just share this as an example. So here is a project. I'll put this in the chat, or maybe I'll just do this afterwards, actually, and I'll do that. Sorry. You can watch this afterwards. This is one of the projects that we've supported, and they talk about the reusability of their resource. So rather than talking about this in the abstract, this is a very practical example that you should be able to look at. So beyond that, then there is the national level. So for example, in Finland, there is a Finnish National Library of Open Educational Resources. This is supported by the Finnish National Agency for Education and the Ministry of Education there. And again, like most of these repositories, provides a searchable, metadata-rich portal where educators, learners, and institutions can discover and share digital learning materials. So you don't need to log in to search and find materials. If you want to upload one, you would have to log in and provide some data in that sense. So this is a good example of a national one. The great thing about these national initiatives is that they're quite persistent. They're going to last into the future, so they're a good place to put your materials. And similarly, in Ireland, we have our own national resource hub as well, very similar to the Finnish example here, driven by kind of national policy. And there's often funding around this as well, such as this project that I pointed to here. And we upload our open educational resources to the National Resource Hub by way of example. So again, I would encourage you to go to some of these resources afterwards, have a look around. Maybe you're talking about generative AI in your learning and teaching, and you'll find loads of policy documents or slide decks around Gen AI that can be reused. So it'll save you making something from scratch. And then at the international level, a number of different repositories as well, but one of the most well-known would be the OER Commons, which is a long-standing international repository, which has education materials from primary school, secondary school, third level, so on. It's got full courses, curriculum, materials, and so on. So again, a great example of an international repository. So you as an individual creating resources, you could have your own local place where you host them. You could also link that to your national repository, and you could also make a record on an international repository like this and link it to one of them. there wouldn't really be a necessity to, excuse me, there wouldn't be a necessity to upload your resource to all three of them. You could upload it to one of them and then you could link across. So that might be a better way of kind of saving data on servers and so on. So then just towards wrapping up, beyond the publishing then, so you can host your material in these repositories really, really easily. But there's a reciprocal nature around OER participation. We want to use and promote these. And there's an onus on you to promote the resources as well to support the discoverability. So as I mentioned in that example in the chat, I've added a video, and that's an effort by us to start promoting these resources to make them more discoverable. And of course, you as an individual, you've got your own networks that you kind of tap into to connect with your academic peers. So these might be via listservs, they might be Discords, social media like LinkedIn and so on. So if you do make a resource and you do publish it on a repository, a local one, national or international, you can promote it through these kind of networks. So then finally then, just to wrap up, I would encourage you to go and look at some of these repositories, look at the resources that are there. If you've got a piece of teaching coming up, maybe before you start drafting the materials, have a look at some repositories, see what's there, see how they're used, see how others have licensed their work, maybe try reusing it, seeing if you can adapt those resources and of course give attribution to the people who've made them, and then use those resources in your teaching practice. So that's a nice kind of a takeaway and a task for you to kind of engage with. And I think that's my time, so I will stop there.
Thanks for sharing, Jeremiah. That was really useful for us to learn where we can store and share our open educational resources and other materials. In terms of INGENIUM, if you have any materials that you wish to share about supporting teaching and learning, we encourage you to log on to the INGENIUM LMS, where we have the Staff Academy. And here we're collecting different forms of material that support open material that supports teaching and learning. I've shared the link in the chat. But now it's my great pleasure to introduce Qiuhong and Krister from the University of Skövde, who will be speaking about the benefits of CC licensing in open science and open educational resources. Over to you.
Okay, we're going to give you a very short introduction to open science, and then Hong will talk more about licenses, so we can proceed here. We will mention the national guidelines from the National Library of Sweden, the Royal Library in Stockholm, which have been issued quite recently, or the last year, a year ago, I think. And they include 6 areas of open science to deal with. Open access to scholarly publications is perhaps the most well-known and very debated area, where research funders and universities and other research institutions are trying to make the most of the money spent on publications to make them open access to 100%. Then we also are dealing a lot with the open access to research data to make them more accessible, and not least also to promote a good culture of planning and describing research data, including sharing metadata. A third area of these national guidelines for open science is the area of open research methods, which includes describing methods used and sharing these descriptions. And of course, we're also today talking about open educational resources. Beyond that, there's also public engagement in science, which could include citizens assisting in collecting research data, and also perhaps sharing computer resources and so on. And the last area here is about infrastructure supporting open science, which of course could be a very wide area, including technology and organizations and so on. Okay, we can continue there. When it comes to open science in general, and not least open research data, the FAIR principles are guiding. When it comes to research data, not least, they include the statement of as open as possible and as closed as necessary. So then this will include the protection of personal data and possibly also commercial data, which could not be shared beyond corporations between enterprises and universities. But in a broader sense, of course, FAIR principles can also be applied to open science in general. Well, then the FAIR principles as applied by the University of Skövde and also by many other universities include the selection of generous licenses to share data and publications and also open educational resources. And this is to ensure long-term access and availability of the university's publication. So, and also the open identifier ORCID for researchers should be used if possible. And of course, it can also be used for sharing educational resources. Okay, I think we can proceed there. And then, Hong, I leave it to you to continue.
Yes, as emphasized, so FAIR principles, they are a fundamental part of in open science. So from my experience of working with open research data, it also means to work with standard structured metadata. So for instance, we add ORCID to the research data, increase findability. We also apply digital object identifier to make sure long-term accessibility. We also need to consider the data format so that materials can be read between different programs. And after a long time, 10 years or 15 years, we also need to choose suitable license for the materials so that to talk with the users how the material can be used and reused. Yes, here is one of the example. We publish research data on our local national repository called researchdata.se. So through metadata, we can see this are focused mainly on machine readability, but also target on human understandings of the material. When it comes to the Creative Commons, why it can fulfill the FAIR principles, because they are designed so. For a typical CC license, we can see they are designed in 3 layers. So the basic layer are the legal codes. They describe the terms and conditions that are legally enforceable in court, so they are lawyer readable. And second layer, the comments, they are the web pages that summarize the legal codes, so they are the human readable. The final layer, they are the technical part, so they are written in a format that can that applications, search engines, and other technology can understand. Of course, they are machine readable. So there are 4 elements in the Creative Commons. They are the basics and adapts to the various scenarios. BY-NC, non-commercial, share alike, and ND. So they are symbolized by visual icons, which also serve as the license buttons to communicate more effectively to the users about the legal terms and conditions. Of course, they are also often nicely presented in various education situations instead of long text for pedagogical purpose. And together, these 4 elements combine to make up 6 different license types. I don't go to the detail today. And besides, there are 2 public domain tools, CC0 and the public domain mark, both means the materials are freely to use, but the difference is CC0 means the owners will contribute their materials to the public knowledge, while the public domain mark is not necessarily set by the owners, rather by the museums, libraries, and archives, and often for old works. So we need to bear in mind, not all the CC license are open license. So open educational resources are the material that either in the public domain or licensed in the manner that enable the users to engage in the 5R activities. So they can return, reuse, revise, remix, and redistribute. So it's very important to share the educational material are shared under open license, and their metadata are also shared in this as far as possible in line with FAIR principles. So in order to promote dissemination and reuse. Yes, there are some additional resources for anyone who is interested in open education and Creative Commons. You can just click around. Thank you for listening. That's all from our part.
Thank you very much for that interesting presentation. We are a little short on time, so we're going to move over now to Terhi from the Southeastern Finland University of Applied Sciences, who will be giving a talk on what open educational practices can benefit. Terhi, over to you.
Yes, thank you, Kai. Yes, I also noticed that I will put my clock on, so 10 minutes about. So I was giving a title, Open Educational Practices, what they can benefit. And I have some ideas of this. And first of all, now we have maybe talked more about open educational resources. So when we think about open educational practices, we can describe them as collaborative practices that include the creation, use, and reuse of open educational resources, as well as pedagogical practices employing participatory technologies and social networks for interaction, peer learning, knowledge creation, and empowerment of learners. I quoted this from Krohn. So I think there is two main points to think about when we are talking about open education, about practice view is something what Anna also bring out is co-creation, doing things together. But also notice that we are already using a lot of pedagogical practices which are open. We are making MOOCs, massive open online courses. We are using peer learning, which can be also described as an open educational practice. So this is kind of the background. Sorry. And then I have like kind of like two ideas about the benefit part. So we can benefit from open educational practices in many forms. And we know, like Jeremiah was saying, we will be overlapping in our talks something, but they can improve accessibility and affordability. So there is more easier to access and you don't have to pay for it. So it's also sustainable thing. Engage pedagogical innovations and collaborative learning and knowledge sharing. So when we are sharing stuff, it will be maybe easier to have new innovations and have new practices. And also all of this is good support for lifelong learning. When our resources are open, our practices are open. But then there is another point I want to share with you, that we can also identify the benefits for each of those involved in using open educational approaches: learners, the educators, the organizations, and the other sector. When we are thinking about open educational practices in learning and teaching point of view, we can see that learners can benefit from those by applying knowledge in wider contexts than their course would otherwise allow. So you're easier to be access to different information. Freedom to access and unchanged opportunities for learning. It will support learner-centered, self-directed, and social and informal learning approaches. So the lifelong learning idea also in here. And in a really practical way, you can think about it will give you opportunity to test out course materials before even enrolling the studies or courses. So you can test, would this be a good study area for me, or is it something else? In educators' point of view, students and other users' feedback and open peer review. It's openly there, easier to use. And I think the second point is important to think about also in a point of view how to motivate our teachers to use open educational practices, make open educational resources, is the reputational benefits and recognition. Before there was something about ORCID, which is usually used in scientific publications and so on, but why not also when you are making open educational materials, you could put your ORCID code in there too. And then collaborative approaches to teaching and learning, like it's more efficient, and cultural a point of view too, because when, like in INGENIUM here, we are doing materials in Finland in Finnish, but when it's shared using CC licenses, which allows to translate the materials in different languages, we only have to make one material and then we can all use it. And of course, you are reaching a wider range of learners when your teaching and your practices are open and your materials are open. And then when we think about little upper level organizations and other sectors too, we can see that also the educational institutions, the universities can also benefit that if they are using and people are using open educational practices. Same as educators, it's recognition and enhanced reputation for institutions. It will efficiencies the content production. So when you don't have to do everything by yourself, you can use or do it together, and increase sharing ideas and practices within the institution and with others. And that's also something to think about, that we can also do this inside our own institution. And I'm sure we are already doing, I know we are doing this in Xamk, but that's the easy thing to start sharing inside your institution, and then you can share it with others too, maybe easier. And then wider ability of their academic content when it's linking to widening participation agenda. And also notice that it could increase understanding of IPRs when you are working with open educational practices. But then there is other sectors too, which we are working as universities together, like public bodies and third sector associations or so on. They will have access to reposable content, and they could have new potential partnerships with content providers and other sectors. We as educational institutions could have the new partnership. We could have materials from there when they are making it openly. We can do it together. And also for them, increase understanding not just IPRs, but also what we are doing in education institution, curriculum development and learning technologies. Could be also good point to notice. But of course, even if I really love open education practices and open education overall, there is also some challenges to consider every time we are talking about this. And there is those three first points are the ones I'm crossing all the time when talking about open education, open educational resources and practices. So how can we know the quality is good enough when we are making materials or when we are using materials? So quality assurance of open educational practices and open educational resources is something we are thinking anyway all the time. In Finland, I just put a link also in chat. We have made a national recommendation for quality for open educational practices and also for open educational resources. then we have to think about educators' readiness and need for training. How can we tell it's safe to do everything open? What kind of training our teachers will need to have? Even if CC licensings have been here, like I think, like for ages, but for now, thinking not all our teachers know what CC by means and what CC by SA means, which are actually the two good license to use when you are using open education, making open educational resources. And then always it's a copyright and licensing, which is complexities. It's a hard thing and think about, but but these is themes we have to remember when we talk about these things. And in the end, I just today put there actually only like like half an hour before the webinar, the idea and the question, which will be the bigger one and is already something, is what will the artificial intelligence mean for open education in the future? But I don't have answer for that. But I know also UNESCO has this Dubai regulation made about use of IE and what it will mean in this context. And then I just have there some sources I have been using, and we actually, that's why I will say we did make this open education MOOC in Finland. It's made in English. I have been using also this in here, but it's not still available, but I hope later in this year, and we can also share it with you. But thank you.
Thank you, Terhi. It's now the opportunity for us to move into discussion groups.